Here, read this.
Woof.
Good morning. It's the 17th of November, 2025, and here is your poem for the day. As always, I will read through the poem in one and then share some thoughts on it at the end. Today's poem is called Author's Ghosts by Muriel Spark. I think that authors' ghosts creep back nightly to haunt the sleeping shelves and find the books they wrote. Those authors put final, semi-final touches, sometimes whole paragraphs. Whole pages are added, rewritten, revised. So deeply by night those authors employ themselves with those old books of theirs. How otherwise explain the fact that maybe after years have passed the reader picks up the book? But was it like that? I don't remember this. Where did this ending come from? I recall quite another. Oh yes, it has been tampered with. No doubt about it. The author's very touch is here, there, where it wasn't before, and what's more, something's missing. I could have sworn. So I chose this poem today because it was the winner of a poll that I put on my channel last night as a bit of an experiment. Well, the poem itself wasn't, but Muriel Spark was. It was a close-run thing in the end. I wasn't really sure how many responses I would get, but Muriel Spark won by 43%, and in joint second there was the option of more Sylvia Plath or Spike Milligan, which came in at 29%. I'll keep doing that. If you look out for, you might see further polls on which poems I'll be covering on different mornings. It helps me make a decision, so thank you for that. And then the reason I selected this poem of all of Muriel Spark's poems is that it has a fun connection to her first novel, Comforters, where we also have the question of authorship imagined as a supernatural question, where a question of who's telling the story, whose story is this, is sort of expanded out into a question of who's haunting who. It's a great comical image to kick things off at the start, the idea of authors coming back to haunt their own books, in the way that, of course, authors might return to their books before they're even dead, making revisions, interfering with the author they were then, on account of how transformed they may feel morally or aesthetically by the intervening years. It's interesting, in her introduction to her complete poems, Muriel Spark writes about this in relation to W.H. Auden, who was a friend of hers, and she recalls visiting Auden and finding him touching up his earlier poetry. Spark says, "He told me that he had been unfavourably criticised for this habit, but he felt justified in making the changes because he understood, now in his mature years, what he had really meant but failed to express precisely when he was young. I thought of this when I looked through my poems. In some cases, I was not even sure what I had meant at the time. 50 years ago, in some senses, I was a different person, and yet I can't disapprove of those poems whose significance and origins I forget." And what the poem also suggests is that the books will be touched up regardless, without the author's help, in the minds of their readers. A book read 20 years ago can seem so different on rereading it today that you might think that you're reading a completely different edition. So when the speaker of the poem says, "Oh yes, it has been tampered with, no doubt about it. The author's very touch is here, there. Is there really no doubt about it, or could it be their idea of the author having changed, their idea of the book, their memory of the book, but also their idea of how the author might have revised this as they themselves have matured and changed?" It reminded me of the aspect of two-way haunting that Peter K. Steinberg and Gail Crowther talk about in their book These Ghostly Archives, where they recount visiting Sylvia Plath archives and noticing that obviously these reliquaries of the dead have a haunting quality, but so too does the archive visitor in disturbing them. They are effectively haunting the past with the present as much as the past is haunting the present in the usual conventional way. I think that Spark very delicately hints at how the speaker's memory may be so fallible that it is creating its own ghosts, that it's haunting itself in effect. Her very first line, "I think that authors' ghosts creep back," has a note of uncertainty about it. And then she leaves us at the end with a touching note of confusion as the speaker, standing in front of her books perhaps, says, "Something's missing. I could have sworn."